Hey Doc, how's it going today?
Good, Al. How about you?
Pretty good. Thank you so much for joining us on our. Oops, you got a call on Clarity Digital Podcast. And I apologize, I missed our last one. I was traveling and I screwed up on my scheduling. Um, I would love for you to introduce yourself for our audience about your professional background in particular. That would be wonderful.
Okay, well, I'm Doc Sheldon. I've been working in SEO for coming up on 23 years now.
Wow.
Before that, I was about 20 years. I was a business management consultant. And now I am the CEO of Web Narwhal with a couple of partners. And we take care of managed hosting, design, content strategy, privacy, accessibility, technical SEO for many years has been my primary focus, and that's what I do. And I do that about, certainly 7 days a week and 16, 18 hours a day. That's what I'm into.
Oh wow. 7 days a week. Not no days off, huh?
I had a day off in 1997.
Oh wow. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do that. I like to take one day off. We SEOs and marketers, especially in this today's very ever changing marketing field, we have to work a lot and we have to learn a lot and we have to stay on top of things. But I do take one day off, so it's or else I would lose my mind. But more power to you. So thank you for the intro, and let's just jump into it because you mentioned technical SEO and accessibility, and we're going to talk about both, but I really want to focus on accessibility because it's more and more becoming a thing. I've even noticed companies getting sued for not being accessible enough, and it plays an important role in a customer experience. So, what's the state of union today with accessibility? Like what is it important, and is accessibility a few things that you just check and you move on, or is it something you constantly do and refine and optimize for?
No, it's definitely not a set it and forget it thing. It's the sort of thing of anytime you make an edit, a correction, or add a new post to your blog, or change the date on your homepage, you've got to make sure that anything that you do remains accessible. And a big problem with that is particularly for folks like WordPress users, if they've made modifications to their theme to make things accessible, and then an upgrade comes out either to the core, the WordPress core, or to the theme, and sometimes even to plugins, it may undo, if they're not running a child theme, it may undo the changes they've made and make things suddenly unaccessible. Initially, when people were getting in trouble because some ambulance chaser would send out a demand letter and they told them to take a flying leap or just fail to respond, then it would turn into a lawsuit. Initially, the courts were being somewhat forgiving of respondents that were making an honest effort. Maybe they weren't hitting the mark yet, but they were at least trying to. And they were somewhat forgiving and lax in the punishment. That is slowly fading. And they're
Hmm.
starting to get a lot more hard nosed about it because it's getting a lot more publicity. And the problem is that so many people think that accessibility just addresses folks that are blind, and that is one very small portion. That obviously is an important portion of the users that are affected by failure in accessibility, but it's not the only one.
Yeah.
And so sometimes folks will go in there and they think, okay, I've downloaded this overlay and it tells me it'll make me compliant, so I'm okay now. And
Hmm.
no, you're not. First of all, they all lie. They all say, we'll make you compliant. That in itself is a lie because even if you could donate 24 hours a day for the rest of your life, the chances of making a site fully compliant to all potential users that had any sort of impairment is next to nothing. It's just too complex. Can you get to the 95 percentile? Sure, but it's an uphill struggle. So, you're not going to hit that mark. Uh, Overlay is not going to do it either. And the problem,
Yeah.
all they're going to do with the overlay is they're going to drain your wallet.
Yeah.
And I just made some enemies in the industry, I know, by saying that, but I'm sorry. That's the fact of the matter. They just can't. No theme is going to make you compliant. It may make you partially compliant in some regard, but you can go right now and you can download 3 different browser add-ons that will look at your contrast, for instance, and show them a particular portion of your page. All 3 of them will come out with different numbers. One of them
Yeah.
will say it failed. The other two will give you a 92% good and a 61% good. You can't believe these things. Now with AI being brought into play, it's even more difficult. I mean, you and I know when you spend time on it, it's difficult with any assurity to be able to look at a piece of content and say, yes, that is AI, or no, I don't think that's AI. And the tools
Yeah.
that say they can do it have just as much difficulty as you and I do. So to be able to expect it to tell you whether your contrast is right, whether your transcript on a video is accurate, it's just it's a pipe dream. You're not going to hit it. So it takes human testing, and the human testing is an important aspect of thorough accessibility testing. You actually use impaired users that are impaired in each of these different areas, like it's vision, it's audio, it's tactile, fine motor skills, ADHD, or something like that. Folks that have cognitive issues, you use those users to actually go in and test your site and annotate what they find.
Oh wow.
That,
I
that's an
mean,
honest
I just
effort, okay? But
I
it's
just
not.
found
It's
I just
amazing.
found no, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just found out what I'm going to get into next because I do have a pretty strong case of ADHD, and I might even be mildly autistic. So I could fit in.
Well,
If you ever need help, let me know.
okay. Yeah,
No, yeah. I
it's
mean,
not. There's no set it and forget it mode. No, anything that you're doing, even updates, if you're not making changes on your site, even updates have the potential for breaking your accessibility. So you need to monitor it constantly.
yeah. I just noticed this on our own website. It's interesting you brought a WordPress. We made some recent changes to it, and we sent an email marketing campaign last week. We offered some really good offers, like free audits and stuff like that. We got very little positive result, and I'm like, this is crazy. I was trying to figure out what it is, and then I realized something broke in our website. Our page are loading 2 or 3 seconds. So it's like this is unacceptable. On a desktop, I'm getting bored. On mobile, I would completely leave right away. So I'm waiting for my web developer today, being a holiday, for him to come back next week and fix it. I just literally, like, right before the call, I realized that the page is loading really slow because you know how it is with us marketers. We don't pay attention to our own stuff as much as we do for our clients. So uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and and
Cowboys
and,
kids, right?
yeah, and let me ask you a question about, like, where is the source of truth when it comes to accessibility? Because for example, SEO, we decide, even though we know, for example, SEMrush is not, or SEMrush they call it these days, it's not the best data, but we select it to be source of truth. So when we report to our clients, we use that tool or another tool, whatever tool you use. But is that like that with accessibility? Like, let's say if you have a client that is paying you to make sure the website is accessible, do you have dashboards? Where's your source of truth? Because the way you made it sound like it is like it's kind of like all over the place. You got to use the tools, you got to use all the plugins and themes and stuff like that. But you also have to do a lot of human testing, and uh, that's very difficult to report on. It's like, how do you do your reports? When you are testing for accessibility.
Well, I mentioned some add-ons, browser add-ons like Wave, Axe, both of which I like. I use them constantly. First of all, anytime we do an accessibility audit, we do use multiple tools for the very reason I stated earlier.
Mm,
But you can even do something like I use Sitebulb for my technical audits. Okay,
mm,
well, Sitebulb will point out an awful lot of issues that may be accessibility issues as well. Like, for instance, the failure to have alt attributes. That's a
yeah.
major accessibility thing, because if you have a vision impaired user who's using a screen reader without alt attributes, He's going to be, getting no information on what's there. So, there are many aspects of technical SEO which a tool like Sitebulb will
Yeah.
find and point out for you. But then you have to dig in. It'll spit out 148 pages that have uh, images with no alt attribute. Okay, so now you have to get down into the mud and check each one individually.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that people have a tendency to use for an alt attribute. They'll say, "This is a picture of my dog eating a bone." Okay, well,
Hmm.
algorithms aren't nearly as stupid as we sometimes think they are. They know it's a picture. You just wasted part of your letter count, your character count. Why do you have to say it's a picture of? You say, you
Ah.
know, and then be more descriptive. Golden Labrador chewing on a large bone. That's is better. Because what you need to do is you need to put yourself in the user's seat and think, what is really describing to me this image?
Yeah, I think part of the fact is people have never used, uh, like you said, put them in the user feed. They have never had to. They don't know how to do it. So and I know from back in the days, early days of SEO, where we would stuff those alt tags with keywords, and that even
Yeah.
and now that's not a good thing anymore, because your image actually, your alt tags actually has to describe the image, obviously, as briefly as possible. And I have also known companies have got sued for that, by users, by there are lawyers going around suing companies, bigger companies. And that's something that we guide to our clients, that, hey, the image is good if you can optimize it for SEO, but you should really describe what the image is. And you brought up a good point. If it's already a picture, you don't have to say it's a picture, right? So just use that. Yeah. What besides alt tags and things like that, what is like, if you had to say there's three or four, maybe five major things that you have to be looking on your website, that, like, this is like a must be accessible, like, and because you said earlier, it's pretty hard to get it 100% accessible. What is like a few must haves that must be in place for you to be able to call your website relatively accessible?
Well, you need to look at the things that have to be addressed. I mean, you're talking about users that have vision impairment, obviously, uh, users that have audio impairment. If you have a video on your site, and I'm Jeff, without a transcript, it's useless to me.
Yeah.
Fine motor skills. Sometimes if somebody has a tremor or some inability to use a mouse with any level of accuracy, then they need to be able to use a keyboard to navigate. They can tab from one thing down to from link to button or whatever. They can go to these functional items on the page one
Yeah.
after the next, and they can look at they're used to using this. They glance at a page and they know, okay, it's going to take me 6 or 7 clicks to get down to that button.
Yeah.
Tap, 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 tap. There I am. Okay. And every time they hit one of those, it has to highlight so they know that they're on it. So then cognitive issues, if they have ADHD, autism, you want to avoid things. There's also the issue with folks that may be epileptic. You want to avoid any kind of flashing or strobing effect, even in
Yeah.
videos. But sometimes, you remember the old MySpace days, everybody had to have blink on their page, and it looked like a mall opening. And you also have to have consistent navigation. So cognitive issues. If you move your navigation from the top nav to the left sidebar to the right sidebar to satisfy your desire to have some special design criteria on a page, you're confusing they're used to seeing either left sidebar or top nav,
Yeah.
usually top nav. And if they suddenly go someplace and it's only in the footer or it's only on the side, it's confusing. So
Yeah.
it doesn't make it impossible, but it does make it more difficult. And then even
Yeah.
speech impairments. There are people that can't speak or can't speak clearly enough to be able to talk to their system. So they need to have the ability to use text instead, so they can use
Oh.
their keyboard to type in something.
Yeah.
So those are the things you need to first know, that you're not focusing just on a blind user. You're focusing on people with any of these impairments.
Interesting. Yeah. um you brought up a really good point, the keyword. I don't do that anymore, but like when I was younger, I tried to use my keyword as much as possible. So I would use a tab to kind of navigate around the page. I didn't like the mouse that much, and it would really piss me off when like you would some of the tabs it wouldn't work, it would jump, it wouldn't go in order. Like I would just like it would be very frustrating. So
Yeah.
those are the little things that that matter a lot when we make applications, for desktops. And now I think, one thing that unfortunately I see happening in the web apps is that they don't follow the proper software engineering methodologies. I got my degree in computer science. We had at least a couple of courses in addition to our programming languages. We had at least a couple of courses about software engineering, like what does it take, all the agile testing and so on and so forth. But I don't think a lot of companies don't follow those methodologies in the web, and they just put out pages, and you have to like you figure things out like a lot later. And I think a lot of it that can be resolved if people like you and I, are involved a little bit sooner, because we have eyes and we have focus about things that they probably don't, right? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And, it would be lovely if your user and your sales guy or whoever manages the phone center, for instance, or
Yeah,
the pre-qualified callers, your developer and your SEO, and sometimes the SEM guy, if it's a different person, could all actually have a civil team spirit towards the thing, as opposed to I've done my part, now you get to look at it, but you can't change it. And a lot of times you find, trying to get the developer to actually implement something can sometimes be a problem. And I'm sure that
yeah,
there's a lot of developers out there that say, look, I built this wonderful functional page. Now along comes this jerk SEO and he wants me to change everything.
yeah,
And then they're not wrong. I mean, sometimes it comes across that way because what they've done, they were uninformed in our area and we were uninformed in their area. So we end up fighting with each other, or I should say against each other rather than working with them.
yeah,
And, if we could have that cooperation from the beginning, yeah, it'd be dynamite.
yeah.
I've been blessed a couple times with that and it's been wonderful, better than sex, but it doesn't happen very often.
Nah, I don't know if I would say about that, but I do. I'm pretty like when I work with clients that are more savvy and more informed about the need to be more proactive. Let's say about technical SEO, I like that a lot because it's a lot more difficult to fix some of those technical SEO stuff. Like let's say taxonomy, URL structure, like you got to go through redirects and stuff like that. And I'm assuming it's the same thing with accessibility. Like sometimes it would be a lot more challenging to fix things after they go live, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, something that takes you 5 minutes of input on the front end of the project could take you
Yeah,
3 or 4 hours to try to fix it and then refix something else that it broke and make it fit. If you've got three divs across the page and they're basically just blurbs, and you've got them set up so that they're nice 5 lines of text in the blurb with that more at the end, to link to blow it up. And along I come and I want to work in this keyword. Now all of a sudden that one div just turned into 6 lines. And this is
yeah,
the kind of thing that makes the dev pull his hair out because now he's got to redesign everything to make it fit. And
sure.
again, if you've got a client, and I'm working with one right now, it's wonderful because he is tech enough not to just understand a lot of it, but also to be willing to listen to the
Yeah,
why and how to do certain things. And it's
yeah,
a pleasure to work with somebody like that because you're not having to fight them. You may make them aware of something that they're not aware of beforehand, but if they're willing to listen, bang. So this guy wants to do a new site, and he wants me to be involved in the front end. And I've got some great conversations with his dev. I anticipate no problems whatsoever because we're both going to have our jobs made easier in the long run. And he's going to get a workable website faster this way.
sure.
I wish it happened all the time, but this is the first time.
Yeah, sure. Um, let's think about larger organizations like enterprise level organizations where there are different departments and group. Usually SEO person falls into either marketing, or if they are technical only, they fall into like IT team or engineering team. Where do accessibility expert, which department is ideal for that person to work in? Which is it, marketing, is it IT or tech, is it product, or is it
Uh,
like?
I would say my preference would be either a standalone, answers to the CEO, or attached to the legal department.
Hmm,
And the reason I put those two possibilities together is the fact that if it's going to be the CEO, then, or maybe it's the operation, VP of ops, whatever, but to somebody at C level, then you need to make them understand, and they need to be willing to understand the legal ramifications of failing to comply.
yeah,
You're talking about, you're a $30 billion a year corporation. You're not going to get fined $1,200, buddy.
yeah,
Add another half dozen zeros at the end of that, and you might be in the ballpark. So, it's serious. Not to mention the impact it can have on your day-to-day business, on your client base, on every your reputation.
yeah, your
Because
conversion, right?
sure,
Like,
well, your
yeah,
conversion, but even if one guy who has an audience decides to single out your corporation for having refused or having made no honest effort to accommodate handicapped users, that's a blow that your rep may never recover from.
yeah,
Depends upon how much traction he can get, and there are folks out there that will do that because
yeah.
that's how they build their reputation. Hey, this guy took down Procter and Gamble. He took down General Foods. Uh,
Oh yeah, I know so many. I mean, I see so much of that happening, and that was a perfect answer because, in SEO you can get away putting an SEO expert, in marketing or tech. I when I was in house SEO, I've been in all departments. I had reported to the chief product officer or whatever. I had reported to the CMO. I reported to CTO, and and a part of SEO would get deprioritized because it was so black box with normal users. They're like, well, the users are not going to see that, so who cares? But accessibility seems like it's a lot more important because we're talking about legal issues now, and
yeah,
larger companies, they take that very seriously. I used to work for Experian, consumer bureau, credit bureau agencies, and then later I went back work for them as a contractor. We could not publish even a sentence or a few words on our website without legal approving it. So that's a good place for accessibility team to be. Hey, this page isn't accessible. Do something else. Um, so that's a really good answer. Thank you.
and most CEOs, they got enough on their plate. They don't really want to have to babysit
Yeah,
this additional person. They're going to push it off on their legal department anyway. But
yeah.
I think
I don't even know.
that's
Yeah,
important because then you've got somebody that has the stroke to say, I don't care if you like it or not, Dev. I don't care if you like it or not, SEO. Make it happen.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I don't even know who the CEO was at Experian, but I did know the legal team pretty well because I was in the front end things, and they would push back on a lot of my initiatives. Because I would do my keyword research. I'm like, hey, we got to put this keyword. They're like, no, we can't do that because of this and this reason. So that's really good answer. Thank
yeah.
you. So let's say things are changing a lot these days with AI and everything. How can you leverage AI to enhance some of your audits and maybe improvement? For example, I have been using AI, obviously not to just write content or whatever. I've been using it a lot for data analysis, and instead of dumping it in an Excel file into data, I used to do it in ChatGPT, and then somebody else introduced me to this tool called Julius AI, which is just for data science. It's like ChatGPT for data, and I've been using that a lot to like analyze data, coming with insights. I still review to make sure like it's 100%, it's not just made up or there's no hallucination. How do you use AI? How, or do you even recommend using AI to do some of your tasks to enhance some of the things they used to do manually?
Uh, I have not used personally made a lot of use of
Hmm.
AI, so I'm not a great person to answer this
Sure.
question. I have looked at it, and I have, in order to make an informed decision as to whether it's something I want to put time and effort into. And I haven't had the surplus of time and effort to really motivate myself yet. But I also have misgivings still. The hallucinations obviously is
The
one
huge,
aspect.
yeah,
From a standpoint of generating content, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I will use it to build me a bullet list, if you will, an outline for content. I think it could be fantastic for that. I've seen some examples that were impressive. But to actually write the content, I'm going to spend as much time reviewing it and editing it as I would
yeah,
writing it. So why risk? But I do think that from the standpoint of accessibility, I think there are ways to make good use of AI. ChatGPT 5, my guess is would be quite capable of doing it. You'd have to be a much more skilled prompt writer than I could hope to be.
yeah,
It takes a very, for instance, you could tell it, use this tool, use Axe and look at this piece of content and tell me whether this page, I should say, and tell me whether the contrast in all regards complies to the 4.5 minimum to 1 minimum contrast. It might be good at that.
yeah,
I would still, because I'm a doubting Thomas, I would
mm,
still have to double check it because it'll lie to you.
yeah,
It wants to please you. It's like a 6-year-old. It's going to tell you what it thinks you want to hear. That's not what I
yeah,
want. But I do think that there's potential there, and it's developing quite rapidly. I suspect that the hallucination issue is going to get beaten in relatively little
yeah,
time to where that's no longer an issue. But it's yeah, certainly there's the capability for it to look at certain things, to make sure that the font size, and it can look at the source of a page and tell you if there's any font anywhere on the page that's less than 12 point, which is the minimum for accessibility.
yeah,
So if you've got some 9 point down in the footer, it's going to point that out to you. That sort of thing. Once you can build a confidence level, you can trust what it's telling you. I think it can save an awful lot of time.
gotcha.
And I'd love to see somebody who is really skilled at developing an
Yeah,
AI come up with a tool that was specifically focused on
yeah.
accessibility. That would be a godsend. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think there's when it comes to AI, there's like, as of right now, as of today, April 18th, 2025, I've seen three or four different type of solutions. The very generic solutions like ChatGPT, where you have to really prompt it really well, and you have to know how to make prompts, and then you can also turn to custom GPTs once you get it right. And that's what we do first. Like we figure out the Trump prompt, talking about devil there, but we figure out the prompt, the ideal prompt, and then once we figure out how to prompt it and everything, we turn into a custom GPT where we don't have to keep doing that. The second thing that I've noticed is that a lot of the legacy tools are beginning to add AI features. Now I can't speak on accessibility tools, but SEMrush, for example, is adding a lot of cool AI features to their stuff. Some of them are
Yeah.
free, some of them you have to pay for, and then there's those third party tools like the one I mentioned, Julius, where just that's all they do. Julius, I highly recommend you playing with it if you do anything with data and web analytics and data science like I do. That really helped me save a lot of time. Again, I still double check the work to make sure there's no hallucination, and which still does happen even with Julius, but it's a lot less than would happen with ChatGPT. And the fourth thing would probably be the agentic AI. The agents are going to come up, but then agentic AIs are going to be very limited, only a specific task.
Yeah.
So while it's exciting, it's still, you got to, the human intervention almost with everything, whether it's content writing, SEO, data analysis, or accessibility is much needed. So I personally look at AI as a power tool, but you're 100% right. You got to double check everything. So let's just talk about, like, let's say I want to get into accessibility. Where can I go learn about it? Where do I start?
Well, the first thing I think would be you could open up an account on WCAG
Hmm.
and you can subscribe to their newsletter. You can look at their entire directives there on their
Sorry, what was the
website.
website again? I
And
missed that part. Okay,
WCAG,
okay, got it.
WCAG, and they're good. They're the Bible.
Hmm.
Okay, and they're also for the oh God, I just went blank. The oh, I just went totally blank on the acronym now. There's a regulatory commission that actually sets up standards like you've got to
Yeah,
have a ramp at the front of a public
yeah,
business for wheelchair users. Okay, and and they even lean heavily on WCAG because now people are beginning to look at brick and mortar and online are beginning to blend in terms of regulation and
yeah,
enforcement. And I think that's a good thing, so that you're not looking at, why, if I happen to have a brick and mortar and a website, why do I have to learn two different sets of
yeah.
laws? It doesn't make sense. So it's one thing I want to mention. I got involved like several years ago before the European Union issued their privacy compliance GDPR. Studying that heavily, the first thought, I open up the document and, good lord, it's something like 470 pages, and and I don't care, if you're not a General Foods, you don't have the budget to address these
Yeah.
issues. But as I got into it, I began to realize, okay, yeah, there's 470 pages, but there's only 17 pages that are going to apply to me and my
Yeah.
website, okay, my operation. So that was a blessing in disguise. That what they did is they wrote a document that would cover all conceivable situations, and then you have to go through and determine which ones apply to you and your functions. Con, con it was somewhat
Hmm.
counterproductive in that it scared a lot of people. It was
Sure.
intimidating. So a lot of people just tried to ignore it as long as they
Yeah.
possibly could. And the difference is now when you look at accessibility, there's not 470 pages, but they all
Hmm.
apply. There's no exclusion. It all applies to you. You may not have an e-com function on your website, but everything that applies to an e-com site applies to every single page on your
Hmm.
website. So, it's the same animal. There's no escaping it,
Yeah.
and it is becoming law, and more and more. Now, at this point, we have every state is coming up with their own
Yeah.
standard, and some of them differ a lot. Like California originally came out with theirs, which was basically a carbon copy of GDPR for privacy, but they decided that it only applied to if they decided to sell your information, not if they decided to share it or use
Yeah.
it. Well, they've changed that now. They realize that wasn't going to apply, so they've come back with a different directive. But all these different states differ. So if you're in the United States, even if you're not international, if you're just in the United States, you have to look at the worst possible case. What is the most stringent regulation out there, and conform to that so that you're not in
Yeah.
trouble. Because if you conform to the second most stringent, that one last guy might get you. So there is effort, uh, was effort, at least up until a few months ago, in Congress to come up with a national
Hmm.
standard. Now they seem to be occupied with other things that are
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah.
but they want to come up with a national standard that will set a minimum and remove that bogus from having to
Deal with different
meet
states.
60, 50 different standards. it's it's challenging. The same is happening with accessibility, but they're further down the road. We now have a national standard. We have WCAG, and that is the Bible,
Got it.
and no state can override that. They can make suggestions. They can indicate that they would love to see it. They consider this a plus, but they can't hammer you for not doing it as long as you meet the federal
Yeah.
standard.
Well, I don't.
And no, Colorado is not going to spend the money to prosecute you on their standard because it was more stringent than the national
Yeah.
standard.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You know,
I'm actually quite surprised we do have a national standard for accessibility. You know, the state of the way the things are at with with in politics and this the country being pretty divided on a lot of issues, we were able to actually and agree on this. But that's a different conversation. Well, I think we're running out of time. I have a couple more questions for you. You have
Sure.
you provided a lot of information that, and obviously you and I can talk about this forever. But where can people find you if they need your help with auditing the websites for accessibility or even hire you?
Well, as I said, I'm the CEO of Webnarwal. I'm on Facebook a lot,
Good.
probably more than it's healthy. Doc Sheldon on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I believe on LinkedIn I'm using my Doc. Doc is a nickname from my military days. My full name is Sheldon Campbell.
Got it.
Okay, and that's the way I'm listed on LinkedIn. But you can find me at
Hmm.
doc@webnarwal.com, or you can find me at docsheldon@gmail.com.
Cool. I was gonna ask you a couple of personal questions. That was one of them. Like, Doc, what is it short for? So you just explained it. Which branch of military did you? Uh,
I was
Navy.
Navy.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And the second, well, maybe you already answered one. The second thing I was gonna ask you, when you said you work 7 days a week, but you have to take some time off, even if you're when you're not working. What are you doing? I mean, when you're not working, you're not sleeping. What are you doing?
I enjoy cooking,
Oh, good.
and I do that. I do spend, like I said, more time on social media than I probably could over the last few months. It has been primarily just staying informed on the events, days events, and but I've always spent more time than I should just doom scrolling, looking through Facebook, and I spend a lot of time, excuse me, uh, following threads of colleagues that I respect
Yeah.
and know, to the extent that we never met face to face, but I've known them online for
Hmm.
years. So, and I respect their opinions. So I'll follow their blog or I'll follow their posts on LinkedIn or Facebook. I don't do Twitter,
Yeah, me neither. Yeah.
and but I like to stay abreast of things. And sometimes it's just to unwind and to turn my mind off of business and whatnot. I'm just going through. I'm looking for jokes. There's a couple of content generators on Facebook. They're absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
They generate two or three little shorts a day, and I subscribe to them, and I love them. And that kind of it gives me a little bit of mental
Yeah.
relief. I can stop worrying about this work plan for the rest of the. I'm going to be on this till 11:30 tonight, but I'm going to take 15 minutes and unwind with this and watch this short. Comedians, and every once in a while I get into Netflix and find me an old John Wayne movie. I enjoy John Wayne
It's funny you say it's
because
funny you
early.
say that. I took a week off from social media thinking that would help me better to take care of myself more and focus more on work and business, and I got more stressed out because honestly I
Yeah,
was using Facebook and Instagram to like watch memes and forward stupid stuff to my friends, and you and I are Facebook friends, but I've never sent you any of those, but I do follow you. You've been kind enough to remember my birthdays and send me birthday candle almost every year. But I realized like not having social media, it was just like stressing me out more because that was like a relief for me from like a real life. And
right.
so it's interesting you mentioned that. Well, Doc, it's been a pleasure. It's Friday afternoon. And I benefited a lot from this conversation. I hope everybody else has too. We gotta have you again to talk about your other expertise, which I believe was privacy and technical SEO. So hopefully we'll have you again on in future episodes.
I've enjoyed it,
Thank,
Al. Appreciate the
thank you. Take
invitation.
care. Have a good one.
You have a
You
great
too. Bye
weekend.
bye.
Bye bye.